All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this presentation on anxiety and maybe some tools we can use to help our kids. Rochester Area Youth Assistance, also known as RAYA, is a nonprofit organization whose goal is to strengthen youth and families in the Rochester community and to reduce the incidence of delinquency, abuse, and neglect through community partnerships. RAYA provides professional counseling and casework services for youth ages 5 through 16 and their families who live within the district. This assistance is confidential. Referrals can be made by school personnel, police, parents, friends, and the young people themselves. RAYA also provides financial assistance to families in need to help with club and program fees for youth activities. The RAYA Family Education Committee provides a variety of programs throughout the year which facilitate family growth and development. They include workshops, guest speakers, and parenting classes. Our next parent event, which you might be interested in, is going to be co-sponsored with the Rochester Hills Public Library, and it's about resiliency. It will be held on Tuesday, May 25th at 7 p.m. And we will have psychologist and mindfulness expert, Dr. Christopher Willard, presenting via Zoom. So if you're interested, please go to the Rochester Hills Public Library website and register there. Their site is rhpl.org. Now it is time for our main event. We are lucky to have 3 Rochester Community Schools experts joining us tonight. We have psychologists Caroline Rowe, Dan Pryde, and social worker Andrew McNeilly. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to get us started. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Good evening, everyone. Thank you guys for coming. My name is Andrew McNeilly, and I am a school social worker for Rochester. I've been just finishing up my 14th year here at Rochester, all at the elementary level, which has been kind of fun and great. Currently, I'm at North Hill and University Hills, providing support to the students and staff there. I think I recognized a few names that came in, so it's nice to see some friendly faces and names. All right, again, thank you guys for coming to engage with us on this really important social emotional learning opportunity. I know over the past few years, Rochester has really been advocating to promote social emotional learning within the district, to find topics and engagements for students and for parents to kind of learn about this topic. So today, and thank you to Raya for promoting this and putting this together. Today, our goal is to talk a little bit about anxiety, provide you guys with some psychoeducation. What is it? Why do we have it? How might it manifest in children? What are some of the signs and symptoms? What do we do in our schools? And then most importantly, can we provide you guys with some tools and strategies to help your little ones at home manage, cope with these feelings of anxiety? I will tell you too, the chat function is available. If you have questions at any time, feel free to throw them into the chat. I think we're going to try at the end of our presentation to answer any questions that you guys may have. All right, anxiety, what is it? I'm sure you guys are all aware, all of us experience some levels of anxiety throughout our day. Small amounts, small levels are really, really normal for us, for kids. A lot of times kids have developmental anxiety and fears. These are normal, such as fear of the dark, monsters, dogs, separation from mom and dad, fires, right? Like these developmental fears are somewhat normal for our kids. However, disproportionate anxiety, meaning high levels of anxiety, can be problematic and might not go away like some of these developmental fears or developmental anxiety that our kids face. So what does this look like? The developmental fears and anxiety are not always logical, right? They are, it typically does not make much sense. And therefore, we really can't defeat it with the logic part of the brain or with logic statements such as, don't worry about that, or that's not something to worry about. It's more of in the emotional center of the brain. So anxiety stems, like I said, in this emotional center of the brain. It's a survival and biological function that is actually important for us. Like it keeps us alive, right? It activates this fight, flight, or freeze response that's located in the emotional center of our brain. So in other words, like our anxiety is like our alarm system, right? It keeps us alive. It keeps us safe. It slows us down. It keeps us mindful of possible dangers. It also helps us stay motivated and prepares us for tests or large presentations like today. So some small doses of anxiety is important and is good. Again, when it turns problematic is when that anxious alarm system stays turned on. I kind of view it like a light switch, right? So when that light switch stays on our kids, this can be very, very difficult for our kids to cope with some of these anxieties. It also makes it more likely that they might get stuck with these signs of anxieties, even in small and benign, non-threatening opportunities, such as going to kindergarten, riding a bus, taking a test, right, coming to school, talking to a friend. If their light switch is turned on, that anxiety level is high, then those small things could create a big overall anxious reaction. That may look like crying or freezing, becoming dysregulated, becoming angry. We might see somatic complaints such as headaches or stomach aches, or pleading with you or begging with you, please don't make me go to school. All of those are kind of signs and symptoms that anxiety brain is switched on. It didn't switch off. So what's our role as parents, right? I know we're going to talk about tools and strategies later on, but I kind of wanted to give you guys a framework or an analogy to view your role with helping your child cope with this anxiety. So I heard this analogy from another clinician, and it really kind of stuck with me. All right, so picture that you're riding on an airplane. Perhaps you're like me, feel a little nervous about getting on the plane, a little anxious, but you do some self-talk and you do some deep breaths and you get on the plane and you're ready to start your trip. Now, again, I don't know about you guys, but as soon as we hit turbulence, my heart starts to race, my stomach gets butterflies, my body tightens, I get tense, my muscles tense, right? That active anxious alarm system is flipped on. Now, if the pilot were to come on over the loudspeaker and say, oh my gosh, we're going to die, the plane's going down, this is awful, our doom is impending, right? Like, we would freak out and panic even more. But luckily, the pilots don't do that, right? They come on very calm, ladies and gentlemen, we got a few bumps in the road here. We're going to be fine here. And after a few minutes, we'll be done with it. And you can turn off that fasten seatbelt, right? They're staying calm. They're telling us what's happening. They're saying it's okay in the sense of it's all right. So that's what we need from parents. We need you guys to be the pilot, the ones to stay calm in the face of our kids becoming anxious. They're going to look at you. They're going to see and find your reaction. They're going to want to know, am I safe, right? Am I okay? So we need to be able to stay calm and say some things like identifying the feeling, such as, wow, things don't feel quite right with you in your body right now. That's okay. You look a little nervous. It's okay. You can be nervous and brave at the same time, right? Giving them this idea that it's okay to feel how they're feeling, but then promoting that braveness, promoting that calmness, that they are safe. They're going to be able to get through it. They're going to be able to cope. All of this idea is that we're going to empathize with that feeling. We're going to validate it. And then we're going to demonstrate, being calm and brave. What we're not going to do is we don't want to tell them logically that that's nothing to worry about, because they'll beg to differ because they're already worried about it, right? They feel how they feel. We don't want to take their anxiety from them. We don't want to give them an iPad when they're feeling anxious as a way to avoid it or distract it. We also, don't want to freak out ourselves, right? We want to stay calm and let them know that they're safe and that they're not in any danger at all. So I actually have a quick story about what this might look like in real world application. I'll be honest, it is a story about my daughter. It is a true story. When she was younger, we went to a restaurant, the Rainforest Cafe. I don't know if you guys have been to Rainforest Cafe, but if you do, there's tons of sounds, there's a ton of animals or animal electronics, and the animals move and scream and yell and or roar or whatever. But it can be frightening. So my daughter at this time is probably the age of 3. So we sit down at a table and immediately the tiger right next to her starts to roar, right? It turns on. This was unexpected for her. She had no idea this was coming. It was unpredictable. And she immediately looks at our face for reassurance. And my wife at the time, we're still married, not at the time, but my wife said, um, should we move tables? She looks upset. And so I took a second and thought about that. And I said, no, she's safe. We need to promote that she's safe, and we need to help her go through that level of anxiety. So we stayed. And within a few minutes, she could tell, hey, nope, you're okay, you're calm, you're safe. She decided, slowly desensitize to it, and we were able to stay and have a nice dinner. And she was able to explore the rest of the Rainforest Cafe. A few minutes before we were about to leave, another family came in, and again, no judgment here. Everyone's doing the best they can with what they can do at the time. They sat down real close to us. Boom, they had a kid about the same age. The animal electronics turned on, and they got anxious, and they picked up and they left. Right, they moved the table. What that tells the child is that yes, this is not safe. We have to move. You can't cope through this. This is not okay. Which is not what we want to do. We want to find moments in time that we know our kids are safe and provide them the opportunity to cope with that anxiety and to cope through it so that they know, A, I'm safe, I'm okay, and I can get through some of these anxious thoughts and worries. All right, I know I just kind of spoke a lot here. I'm going to turn it over and let some of my other colleagues talk. I know Dan is going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in the schools and what it might look like in the schools. So Dan, I'm going to let you go. Okay, buddy?
Thanks so much, Andrew. Hey, again, wanted to thank Rochester Youth Assistance for having us. And they've been doing a lot of great work in the community. And this is a good opportunity for us to come and talk to you a little bit about this important topic of anxiety. I'm mindful, too, that presenting on Zoom is not ideal. And I sit in on a lot of Zoom meetings. It's easy to lose focus. I'm going to try as much as I can be animated, try to present, and hopefully share some information you'll find helpful. I was kind of excited about being able to come and talk with you because working a lot in elementary, I spanned this year elementary and high school, but I've worked a good deal in elementary. And I can tell you that, personally, anecdotally, I've seen just a continued increase with challenges with kids dealing with emotional problems, namely anxiety in elementary school. I was going to share some statistics with you to get us started, not to bore you, but just to give you an appreciation that it's just not anecdotal information. The National Institute of Health did a study from 2007 to 2012, and they found during that time that there was about a 20% increase of anxiety for not just high schoolers, because a lot of times we think middle school, high school, kids dealing with these problems, but among elementary age kids as well. They had a subsequent study that was done from 2013, 2018, 17% increase in anxiety among our kids in both high school as well as middle and elementary school. We certainly are mindful of COVID, right? I mean, we know that kids are even more challenged than ever, but I just wanted to give us a sense that this isn't something that's just kind of creeped up on us in the past year or so. It's been something we've been seeing a trend on for some time. And I was curious, now this could get wacky, but as much as I can try to create some engagement with our meeting, and I know we may not be able to have auditory responses, but if you've got any thoughts, maybe you've got a burning idea as to what's going on in schools and why are we seeing anxious kids in school, would you just go ahead and maybe tap into the chat area there, what it is you think is going on, why we're seeing an increase in anxiety? Icebreaker, anybody? Does anyone have any ideas what's going on with kids? And I'll show you some of my own perspective. And things that are anxious parents, yes, thank you. Awareness of there being a problem. Isolation, boy, that's very true with this time of COVID, lack of trust. Yeah, I think those are all social media. I was wondering when I would see that one come up, and boy, do we react to parents busy families. Man, isn't that true? Elementary, there's an increase in cell phone usage, just screen time in general. Hearing parents being anxious, awesome. And you can keep those rolling. You know, it's kind of nice for folks at home, again, because a lot of times I'll just check in on the chat bar there to see what other people are thinking and some of their input. I agree with you. Let me give you a little peek into the schools, if I could, because Andrew gave a nice general introduction on anxiety, and I wanted to let you have a glimpse into our school building so you know what's going on and why are some kids having some of these challenges, namely with some of the expectations that might drive some of that anxiousness and worry among our young kids. And just not to bore you, but I wanted to give you a little snapshot of what is called sort of a cognitive behavioral model. And it'll help you understand a lot of times why kids might have some of the difficulties they do. And it's simple, and it's just this formula that there's an event, something happens, an occurrence, and then we have a perception. The way we look or think about that event will drive how we feel, and then we're going to have a behavior. So if you happen to be out walking down the sidewalk with your child and you see a person walking a dog, maybe a big German Shepherd coming toward you, your child might think, cool, they might be a dog kid and maybe they've got a German Shepherd at home. And so that perception they have is going to evoke really some good positive emotions. They're going to be excited, and their behavior to follow is going to be to run up and see if they can pet that dog. Hope that makes sense to you. I'm going to tie it back into school in just a bit. Likewise, a child might be walking down and might have a different response, because if that child maybe has been bitten by a dog, or maybe they've never even seen a dog, you can imagine that they may not have the sort of thinking that's going to help to create a positive experience when that dog walks by. Now, I want you to imagine or think about what are some triggers or expectations and events in school setting that might cause kids to have some difficulties or challenges. And I wanted to start us out with one that we see often with our youngest kids, and that's the expectation, or what we see with separation from parents, right? And you probably are familiar with that, the traditional separation anxiety. We're at the end of the school year. We don't see as much of it now, but I can tell you we'll see a ton of it come August and September. And so that ought to make a lot of sense, because some kids haven't had experiences where they've maybe had a lot of separation from parents. And so just the idea of change for those kids is a real struggle. So that's one of the things that we see. Another event, if you will, or something that creates a lot of anxiety or worry for kids, has to do with the issue of performance. And I like to look at two areas, and maybe you can relate to this with your own kids. If you've got kids that are struggling with anxiety, you might be familiar with the issue of performance as it relates to academics. And you're probably aware, if you're like me, and my days of kindergarten were working with paste. That's about all I can remember from kindergarten. I love the white paste. But I got to tell you, these kindergarten teachers, there is no white paste anymore. I mean, the kids are writing sentences. And I don't want you to think that I'm down on high academic standards. It's great. But as we ratchet up the expectations for kids, certainly so often you see some level of anxiety or tension that can create among these young people. And so some of those expectations for them that they might have, either a feeling incompetent or maybe not being as competent as their peers, can also drive some of that anxiety. Another element as it relates to performance has to do with social anxiety. And again, maybe in your home, a lot of times we'll hear from parents, hey, Billy's not anxious at home. Well, he may not be. And maybe he's comfortable with his brothers and sisters. He might be comfortable with the neighbors, but he comes into a school environment, and I can tell you it's much different, and the expectations are different. And so a lot of times we're seeing anxiety that way too. And then I just wanted to make mention in the school setting, if you're wondering, what also can be a factor with anxiety is just the unpredictability of coming to school. There are all sorts of things that can happen. And at home, a lot of times you as parents have probably created a lot of predictability for kids who like routine, and that's awesome. At school, sometimes that gets thrown for a loop. And it might be an unexpected fire alarm that goes off, or it could be any number of things, a change in that routine. And for some kids that are especially temperamentally sensitive, and ones that maybe struggle with change, that can drive also some anxiety. Now, I want you, if you would, to help me on this. What do you think from a school staff standpoint, either as folks like Andrew, Caroline, or myself, or even teachers, what do you think anxiety might look like? How does that get expressed in the school setting? Could you type in maybe what it is you think teachers see that would indicate to them maybe a child might be dealing with some anxiety? Any ideas you have? What might, and Andrew, I know, touched on some of that as he talked about what anxious kids might look like. Frequent bathroom breaks, big time. Yep, anger. And I'm glad you mentioned anger. We're going to talk a little bit about even sometimes maybe some gender differences we might see, inability to move from one activity to another. Absolutely. asking to go home. Hey, if we had our school secretaries here hosting with us, man, they could tell you a great deal about what anxiety looks like because they get a lot of frequent visits. You guys are hitting, this is a very intelligent, informed group that we're presenting to. Great feedback from you guys. And I would agree with everything that I'm seeing scrolling through here. The stomach aches, I was going to hit on this because we know a lot of times when there are psychological stressors, we can have a physiological response. And it isn't just often fake illness. A lot of times these kids have real headaches, stomach aches, or illness that might come about from these psychological stressors. So it's important for us as certainly as a school to be aware of that, a school community, and to partner with our parents to make sure we can really support students who are dealing with some of these stressors in school. Oh, someone turned the lights off. They're getting tired of hearing me talk. Oh, hang in there. Now, in school, what are we doing? And we're going to get to some things that you can do at home, but I can tell you we're trying to do a whole lot more to address the needs that these kids have. And sometimes I'll hear what I consider a little bit of nonsense because people feel like if you get away from reading, writing, and math and try to address any other maybe aspects of learning, they're not in support of that. But I will tell you that there's a ton of research that says if kids don't feel safe, comfortable, and confident at school, they're not going to be ready learners. And I can tell you, I often get a chance to work with students that are exceptional learners, very bright, but anxiety can prevent your brain from functioning like it should. And so if we're not making sure kids feel comfortable in their classrooms, we're going to have a very difficult time trying to teach them that math, reading, and writing, which is so important. In our district in Rochester, other districts are doing this as well, are really trying to get emphasis on teaching some of these coping strategies and aspects of learning to help kids promote some coping mechanisms and tools that are going to help them deal with these stressors. Andrew talked about the importance of not just removing a child from that unpleasant experience, because this is the reality of life, right? We're going to have stressors as we move through life, and we can't live in a bubble. So what can we do as a community, at school, you at home, to help kids manage some of these stressors? And I can tell you, I sometimes will liken this with kids with the need to stretch, right? When you stretch, there's usually a little bit of tension, a little bit of discomfort. And we need that with learning. We don't want kids to have simple learning where they'll never grow, but we don't want them to be so frustrated where they're going to get overwhelmed either. And it's likewise that same way with anxiety. We've got to create a safe environment at school for them. And there might be some opportunities there. And I like the idea of opportunities because at school, it's often at that point of performance where we see more anxiety, where we're going to get that chance to go in and meet that child where they're at, where their need is, and try to help them and teach them those strategies in the moment so they do grow and become more confident. I'd like, if I could, and Caroline, I am watching my time. I'm zipping here, so if you hang in there with me. This is my own fear. I had said I was very reluctant to do a screen share, but I'm going to try it because I'm trying to model for you that I'm willing to overcome my fear. So if you will be patient with me, I'm going to try to do a screen share. And I just wanted to give you like an idea. If I were trying to go into a classroom and work with teachers to try to help kids with strategies that might be helpful for them to know when they become uncomfortable, anxious, uneasy, that there are all sorts of things that we can do to overcome or manage some of those uncomfortable feelings. So one of the tools that we use in my building over at Meadowbrook Elementary is referred to zones of regulation. And there are a lot of different models. The important part of these models is really to help increase self-awareness for kids, because a lot of times students aren't even aware and can't verbalize or articulate how it is they're feeling. And so I might use a simple model. And let's see here, don't fail me now, PowerPoint, to teach a little bit about what colors might represent as it relates to emotions. And as you'd hope you'd imagine, green's the cool color. At least green, in respect to being a ready learner, tells us that we're pretty comfortable and feeling in a good place energy-wise to manage and go forward with our learning in the school day. If we're in the blue zone, we might be kind of low energy, maybe not feeling well, maybe feeling down. Yellow speaks to some increased or agitation, increased energy, where maybe you're starting to get silly or a little agitated and anxious. And red zone, we're starting to lose control. So in the schools, just so you have a little familiarity what we're trying to do, we try to emphasize that importance for kids that they can create and maintain and manage some level of control, because often kids, that's exactly what they're trying to do, is to manage their own anxiety. The problem is it often becomes maladaptive. Their way of managing their school stressors is to cling to the upholstery of your car so they don't have to leave and come into the school. We want to give them tools that are really going to help them get into the school and be a ready learner. And so I will go through it. I got to tell you, kids are awesome, and they can really relate to something simple like this, but something helpful, and give great feedback as we talk about going through the zones. Hey, what does high energy look like? And kids can really relate to this, either because they're excited or sometimes maybe feeling a little bit nervous. And we'll go through, talk about some of the triggers that might cause us to feel that way, and the importance of having tools in our toolbox that allow us to better self-regulate. And that's really the importance of all this, is we want kids certainly to do well academically, but also to really feel very confident and comfortable in that school environment so they can be as successful as they possibly can. And I think really, I'm not going to belabor that point too much, but I did want to have just stop that screen share, just a chance to share a little bit of that model. And I know Caroline's going to spend some time with you, really talking also about other strategies and even things that you might be able to do at home, similar to what we're doing in school, because a lot of times continuity is nice. I've had parents say, Dan, would you send me some of those charts you're using at school? I've had kids put them up on their bedroom walls, and they're practicing some of those strategies, and parents are working with them at home. So thank you. I know I've said a lot. There's my timer. Caroline, I'm passing it over to you.
Oh, great timing, Dan. Thanks. So my name is Caroline, and I am a school psychologist at the elementary level, and I'm also working at a middle school as well. And Andrew, I love that analogy of the parent as like the pilot. That's so great. And thank you guys for telling us a little bit about what anxiety is, why we have it, how our kids experience it, what we're doing at school. But like everyone's been saying, you guys are parents, and you're here to talk about, and learn about what you can be doing at home to help. So I want to talk a little bit about when you notice your kiddo being perpetually anxious or worried about something. And I'm going to screen share as well. And this is the anxiety cycle. This is what it looks like when our kids have a perpetual anxiety or fear. So at the top is that feared event or thought. And what naturally happens after that is avoidance, right? The kiddo that's afraid of the bus, they're going to insist that you drive her to school. And you might see, as we've talked about, outright refusal or some other maybe creative ways of getting out of that feared thing, and that feels good, right? To avoid and get out of that anxious thing. If the bus came to my stop and I cried and clung to mom, and then she drove me to school, it's like, yeah, that feels good. And when that cycle happens a few times, that same anxious thing with that avoidance, that good feeling of getting out of the anxious thing, we're gonna see that anxiety kind of grow a little bit. And as Dan and Andrew mentioned, our little ones aren't always able to articulate their thoughts and fears, and so we see those physiological symptoms, whereas our older kids are probably still feeling those physiological symptoms, but they're going to be better at directly talking about some of those feelings. So be sensitive to those things, and if you can, look for patterns of avoidance, because knowing what your kiddo's patterns are will help you to be able to intervene. So our goal, right, is to disrupt the anxiety cycle. And what I want to share in the next, hopefully 30 minutes, we'll squeeze it in, are just some foundational principles that you can apply to your unique family situation. And as you listen tonight, I want you to, if you can, if you're taking notes or maybe jotting down on your phone, I think listen for strategies that you're already doing. And we don't have a slide deck to share with you. And part of that was selfish because we wanted to see your faces. We miss that human interaction sometimes. But also, I think all of us have probably been to presentations where we get this lengthy slide deck and we never go back and look at it. But I have jotted things down on a sticky note and pinned that to my bulletin board. So if there's something that sticks out to you tonight, it's write it down. And again, I think you're going to be surprised probably especially after looking at the chat, what you're already doing. You guys are probably already doing some really great things. And if we, if you end tonight and we haven't said anything that's new to you, nothing that is a strategy that you haven't tried, then you got to get up here with us next time so you can help other parents, because this can be tough stuff. So, okay, going back to that anxiety cycle, we want to disrupt it. And Andrew talked about this a little bit, and I want to park on it for a second. Validating those feelings and empathizing with your kiddo is one of the biggest things that you can do first. When you're noticing those signs of anxiety, those physiological symptoms, or if you're actually having a conversation about it, acknowledge and validate the feelings. This is such a healthy thing that you can do for your kids. And I think it can be easy for us as adults with our adult problems and adult brains to be dismissive of those irrational fears that kiddos have, or when they're afraid of something we know is not going to hurt them. And we find ourselves saying things like, Andrew had mentioned, you don't have anything to worry about, or that's not really that scary. But again, just by validating those fears, acknowledging the feeling, naming it for them, is going to be helpful. And if you even think about the last time that you maybe vented to a spouse or a friend, didn't you just want them to sit with you for a second and just like, yeah, that would have ticked me off too, right? Our kids need that same validation that we need. Normalizing those worries too, helping them know that they're not alone. Even mom gets scared too sometimes, and keeping the pilot analogy is perfect, Andrew, keeping that calm, neutral tone and posture as you process is really going to go a long way. Now, when I'm talking to kids through emotions, I like to avoid talking about, and this is any feeling, anxiety, anger, whatever it is, avoid talking about the feelings as being good or bad. I like to use the terms comfortable and uncomfortable, because what we find is sometimes kids feel embarrassed and they have shame around some of their feelings. And we want to let them know that they're allowed to feel how they feel. And you want to encourage them to come to you with those feelings, saying things like, I can see that you're really uncomfortable right now. I know these are scary feelings, and that's okay. I'm going to help you through this. That's going to really help your child to know that you're hearing them, you're listening. And that listening, validating, reflecting, that's kind of a lifestyle that you want to have in your home. You want your kids to know that there's nothing that they can bring to you that's going to shock you, and nothing that they say that's going to make bring out a response from you that's going to shame them. And if this is a consistent pattern, you're going to be encouraging your kids not to be afraid to come to you with their bigger problems as they get bigger, because as we know, those tougher emotions and tougher situations happen as our kiddos grow into middle school and elementary. So if you're comfortable with you as a youngster, hopefully that pattern will continue. So validating the feelings, that's one great thing that you can start doing. Another thing that I want to mention is, and this has already been mentioned, but routines. And Dan, you talked about how school can kind of be a less predictable place than the home. And so all of you parents out there that have these routines going on, keep it up. Having those predictable routines is a really great way to help make a secure kid and help them become less vulnerable to their fears. And the pandemic totally threw this off for probably every family, right? Like the past year, I would say probably every routine that we had at some point was busted up, right? And maybe some of you found new routines, and that probably took a little time, and maybe some of you aren't feeling quite settled yet. But having those routines every day is so important. A homework routine, a playtime routine, a mealtime routine, bedtime routine. All of these things are going to build that sense of predictability and be handy when something unexpected or bad happens. And again, the pandemic is a perfect example of this. Remember back, a year ago, do we want to remember that? But think about back to a year ago when you did the first normal thing after lockdown and how good that felt. And I remember having a bonfire outside, and we were all talking about, oh, how normal does it feel to be having a bonfire with people? And that's how our kids feel when they're re-engaging in their routines after something scary. So being able to get your kid right back into a routine, something that's familiar, that's really going to help promote just in general a sense of calm and safety and security for them. Okay. All right. So calming strategies. Sometimes one of our biggest areas of focus when we've got an anxious kid is just to get them to settle. You know, if you've got this sobbing, shaking, screaming, hyperventilating child, you know, they're not going to be able to engage cognitively in any problem solving with you at all. So, and every kid is different, and it's going to take some experimenting probably to figure out what kinds of calming strategies your kids like and what they respond to. And so what we can just talk through a couple distraction techniques. That can be a good way to get through an anxious moment, and not distracting in a way that is coming back, but just to get through that anxious moment, and literally anything just to get their mind off of what they're worrying about. Listening to music, naming animals alphabetically, getting them to help you do a chore. One thing that I like to use with students is called grounding, and it's just a way to get them to engage in their 5 senses and help come back to the present moment. So I'll ask, you know, tell me 5 things that you can see right now, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, and, you know, just kind of go through the 5 senses. Some kids really like that more tactile thing, squeezing, maybe you've got a stress ball or something, hugs, you know, that's often our natural reaction to, you know, support a kiddo when they're feeling upset, is to hug, and that can just be a calming thing. I also want to mention visualization. This is also a great technique. Having your kiddo think about their favorite place, maybe. Maybe it's a vacation spot that you guys took as a family that they really loved, or somewhere in the park that you go often, and just sitting back and thinking about what it's like to be there. What do I see when I'm there? What do I hear? What kinds of things am I experiencing when I'm in this awesome place? And that can really help kids calm down. Deep breathing is another strategy, and there are tons. I mean, you can just Google deep breathing techniques, and you're going to find a million. That you can do it on your hand. You can do it 3 seconds in, hold for 3 seconds, 3 seconds out. And all of these strategies are good. All of them are going to work. The people that study, though, these relaxation techniques, what they found is that they're going to be so much more effective if you practice them when you're calm, not just when you're freaking out. So this could be something that maybe you incorporate into a bedtime routine, is that we're going to practice our deep breathing or our visualization or whatever it is. And copingskillsforkids.com, that was on the handout that you guys got. It's a great website, and they have some decks that you can purchase. And, you know, I have it's like the exploration deck, and it has, they categorize the different calming techniques: relaxation, sensory, movement, and you know, you can check them out there. You can pick through them. It had, in the decks, they have little training, like how to use them with your kids, but you don't need to buy anything. You could have your kid draw a picture maybe that symbolizes what calming technique they like, or take a photo of them doing the calming technique, keep it on your fridge, keep it in their bedroom, and, you know, practice those ways, practice those things that will be calming for them. And some families, I don't know if anybody here has a calming spot, a calm down corner in their home. That's another thing. Explain how to use it. This is where you can go when you're feeling stressed out. Practice using it when they're calm. Put familiar objects in there. It could be, you know, fidgets, the glitter jar, photo of grandma's dog, or, you know, something that's, you know, kind of incompatible with their anxious feelings. I remember we had a kiddo once who loved the smell of lavender. And so he had a calming box, and we had a lavender candle in there, and he would smell the lavender candle, and it really helped him calm down. So find what works for your kiddo, and practice those strategies. All right. So what do we say so far? You're honoring the feelings, validating and empathizing, creating those routines, practicing some calm down strategies for when they're anxious and stressed, and making a plan. This is another thing that you can do, and this is going to be especially, you know, a little easier if you know what your child's patterns kind of are, or their triggers for anxieties. Excuse me, making a plan for getting through it. And this is especially important if you know that your thing is happening when they're away from you, right? If you have your daughter's anxious about an upcoming test, plan for what she's going to do when the test gets handed out on her desk. You know, maybe she takes a couple of those deep breaths like you guys have been practicing. Maybe you make a plan to do all of the easy questions first, skip all the hard ones, and go back and do those ones last. You can ask your teacher for more time if you thinking fast enough. Making a plan is going to help give a sense of control. And you could probably make a plan for almost any type of anxious situation, even if it's really unpredictable, like a peer interaction. Make a script of what are some things that you can say. And so when your brain kind of freezes, going back to that script. Don't get obsessive about the plan, because there will always be variables that you can't anticipate. And we don't, again, want to be that model of how'd your plan go, blah, blah. That can kind of make our kids more anxious. But reinforcing the idea that there is something that they can do when they're feeling anxious, and that you're there to help them. You can be that sounding board for them when their plan fails and they come back and the test went terrible. I froze and I couldn't think of one answer. All right, let's adjust our plan. Yeah, so the other, let's see, let me get back to my notes here. I want to mention this one because I'm probably the biggest culprit on doing this one. One of the worst things that you can say to a kiddo, or really any person that's anxious, is it'll all be okay. And gosh, who's done that? I say that every single time because I'm a comforter and I want to comfort people when they're anxious. But we can't guarantee that everything's going to be okay. So we shouldn't be saying that. Instead, you can say something like, you can get through this, or I know you can handle it. We find ourselves saying things like, I know you're going to have fun at this birthday party, or nobody's going to laugh at you and show and tell. We can't control those things. We want to shift the focus from the outcome, which is what we really can't control, to what we can control, which is how we handle it. So yeah, making a plan, that's always a good place to start. Another thing that you can do is kind of getting at the thoughts. A lot of times what we find is kids have a really unrealistic perception of their fears. Maybe they think they're going to have to face their fear way more often than they actually will, or they think that the consequence is going to be so severe. So kind of talking through that. One example I like to give, for something that's irrational with our kiddos, doesn't frequently happen. Severe weather can be a common fear. Tornadoes, we all know tornadoes can be extremely destructive, but as Michiganders, thankfully, right, we probably none of us have seen a tornado or ever experienced it. So, you have a child that's afraid of those things, have them ask different family members about it and what their experiences have been. And a lot of times that's going to kind of do, test against reality. Like, is this something that I really have to be that afraid of? And sometimes what we find with those persistent fears is that constant reassurance seeking. Every time the sky gets dark, Mom, is this going to be a tornado? And you can give that reassurance a couple times, but once if it's just constantly happening and your kiddo knows the answer to the question, you can stop giving that reassurance and start moving into problem solving. Is the sky's dark? Is this a tornado? Isn't a tornado. How would we know if this was a tornado? Well, the siren goes off. Okay, and what do we do when the siren goes off? And what's your plan? You've made a plan for that probably. We grab stuff, we go into the basement, and so getting into that planning and out helps the kids, shift their mindset out of that fearful into what they can control, which is executing a plan. And another biggie here is modeling. Again, this is being the pilot. The only behavior that we can actually control is our own. And so being mindful of how we react, both when we, see our children encountering something that they're afraid of, or even something that we're afraid of. And I have this example. I used to work at a preschool, and we did a field trip to the park, and the kids were around this pond. There were some ducks, and there was a mother goose and her goslings. And I hate geese. I'm afraid of them. And one of our little guys got a little too close to the goose, and I'm like, Wayne, get away from the goose. And he turned around with these huge eyes, so afraid, ran over to me. And every time we got even close to any of the ducks or the geese, he's, having this response. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he has goose phobia now. I hope he doesn't. But so, we have to just be mindful of these reactions that we have. And something that we can do kind of on the positive end of that is think alouds, verbalize what your strategy would be for getting through an anxious moment. Let's say you're driving your kiddo to piano lessons and you get a flat tire. And for me, that would be the worst. And so maybe you're off on the side of the road and you just say, what are you thinking and what are you feeling? Like, oh my gosh, that was scary. But, I took control of the wheel and geez, I think we have a flat tire and for piano, but I have your teacher's number, so I'm going to text her, and just go through what your strategy is, what you're thinking and how you're feeling and what you're going to do about it. We can also kind of do the opposite of that. And I, don't want to belabor this point too much, but again, when we are anxious about something, be mindful of how you're talking about it. We all have those conversations with our spouse that maybe we shouldn't have in front of the kids. There's that party that you really don't want to go to because you're not going to know anybody there, and making up, I'm just going to text and make up an excuse to get out of it, right? What is that telling our kids that we should avoid? So all of those things, we're nobody's scarring their kids by saying those things and having those conversations, but just be mindful as you're talking and modeling these strategies to your own kids. All right. The last strategy that I have, I saved it for last because it's the toughest one to implement. And it's that piece, not letting your kids avoid. I think a lot of our adults' reaction when we see a kid that's upset is to go right into protection mode, right? We want to rescue little ones when we see them in an uncomfortable situation. We want to prevent the tears or the stomach ache or selfishly the tantrum sometimes, right? But rescue them every time, we're sending them the message that there is a potentially dangerous component to whatever their feared situation is. And Andrea, that's why I love your Rainforest Cafe story. So great of just like an everyday example of how not to let your kid avoid when there wasn't anything dangerous about that. So again, with those persistent fears, something you can do to help your kid overcome is just small steps. So let's say your kid's afraid to get in the water. They won't go in the pool, but you want to enroll them in swim lessons. You want to teach them how to swim. Maybe start off by reading some books about swimming. And once you've gone through the books, maybe you're going to watch some videos of kids in swimming lessons or kids swimming. And once you've gone through some videos, you want to maybe move into some short periods of actually engaging with the feared thing. So you might get on the bathing suit and go to the pool and just sit in the bleachers for 10, 15 minutes. And that's all you do for that day. And, after they've mastered those small steps, getting even further, maybe putting your feet in the water for 10 or 15 minutes. And you might get to the point where your child has mastered all of those little steps. They did great keeping their toes in the water. But now it's actually the day where she knows she's going to get into the pool today and she's crying and, upset. And if it's safe, and again, think about these situations with your own kids, and nobody intentionally puts their kids in a dangerous situation, but if it's safe and you've got a crying kid, stay there for 10 or 15 minutes and your child will start to calm down. That adrenaline rush, it won't last forever. I don't know, anybody's had a panic attack, probably felt like it was 2 hours, but really they typically only last 20 minutes at the most. So try to wait it out until that fear response subsides, because it will. And then you can really start helping your kid pair that feeling of, I can do this with that, engaging with the fear. So it's that short-term pain for long-term gain. And now what I don't want to hear you hear me saying is that we have to make our kids cry to face their fears or something like that. There's going to be times when you got to pull the plug and let them avoid. There are going to be those times. And if you've been taking those small steps and you get to that point and your kid loses it and they're having a meltdown, they weren't ready for that step. Maybe you need to back up and try some other things. And all the while, if you are in meltdown mode with your kid and practice or engage with those strategies that you've been practicing, the deep breathing or the visualization, whatever it is, keep the squeeze ball with you if you know you're going to go to swim lessons and that's going to be scary. So really what this is about is building confidence, building emotional muscles, and helping your kid realize that they can do hard things. And eventually facing their fears is going to become easier and easier with time. And fear response to things might never be a complete zero. And that's okay, because we don't want to get rid of all of our anxiety, right? Anxiety is adaptive and it helps us, stay out of things that are dangerous for us. So we may never see a zero fear response from our kids, but that's okay. We just want to be able to help them to use their coping strategies to deal with that discomfort. And, I was going to use a coaching analogy, but I like the pilot example way better, Andrew. So you're going to be that pilot, helping guide your kids, and using all the opportunities that you can to pair their brave actions with those good self-esteem feelings. So those are my words of wisdom to you. And I know we have a couple minutes left, so a couple questions in the chat, and maybe we can address those. Andrew and Dan, I don't know if you guys have anything else to add.
Yeah, so I see a question in the chat that I kind of want to talk about real quick too from Patrick. It says, what tools for empathizing with your child when they don't express what's causing their anxiety? So this is a great question, because sometimes our kids don't tell us or don't even know why they're feeling anxious. Sometimes the anxiety just comes from this unpredictability of their environment, right? So sometimes there might not be an anxious thought of I'm worried about this or I'm worried about that, but they could be anxious about just some unpredictability. So what I want to do is I'll share a screen with you guys for some scripts that you can tell your kids and say to your kids. These are scripts we try to use in our own home, if we can remember them. But basically saying there's something about this that doesn't feel good. I believe you, right? So you're normalizing and rationalizing and empathizing with this feeling, right? Being nervous doesn't mean you're not brave. You can be nervous and brave at the same time. It can be hard to be a kid with a busy brain. When I was a kid, I used to have a lot of worries. I've never told them about, right? So all of these scripts kind of provide this venue for your feeling is real. I understand it. Let's work through it together. These scripts do come from a clinical psychologist. We've been listening to podcasts at my house from, her name is Dr. Becky at Home. She has a website and some podcasts. I really like how she relates some of this information in a great way to help our kids. So if you're interested in seeing more, she does a lot of stuff on screen time and emotional regulation, anxiety. She kind of tackles a lot of different subjects within her podcast and with her website. So Dr. Becky at Home is someone I've been kind of referring to. I also know there was another question kind of along these similar lines of Patrick. What do we do with some of our kids who have a negative inner voice? And again, I think coming back with some empathizing scripts are going to be kind of one of our best initial strategies, such as, I know things feel tricky right now. I get it. We can do hard things. You can do hard things. If you need help doing these hard things, I'm here to help you, right? Trying to empathize with, I know this seems hard, or I know something doesn't feel right. I believe you, right? Kind of using, again, some of the same language just to open up this idea in this moment of emotion. I know we talk a lot about with this emotion, anxiety or different emotions, just opening up the bench and sitting with our kiddos, and experiencing the emotion with them and helping them kind of calm, will be important. Other questions in the chat, I'll stop sharing. Did you guys get those? I could always send them too.
I just wanted, let me do a screen share alert. I'm going to do my own screen share here regarding negative self-talk. And in the schools, teachers are trying to do more to promote what's sometimes called growth mindset. Kids often say, I can't do it. Well, you can't do it yet. We're trying to reframe for kids some of those negative remarks and self-talk that they've learned or adapted to. And so as a parent, you'll often hear that. I hear it from my kids. You have the opportunity to reframe, and model for your kids some different ways of looking at that. And here are some aspects of that on things that we can sometimes say to ourselves, where if you say, I'm not good at this, we might say, well, what else am I missing? I'm awesome at this, or I'm on the right track. I use some of the strategies we've learned. So helping kids, again, when they get discouraged or frustrated and start to cycle through some of that negative thinking, reframe it in a way that's going to be a help to them. I better stop here.
I have one more quick story if we have time. I think we have a
Is it a goose story?
It is not a goose story. It is a fast forward of my earlier story. So the story of my daughter at Rainforest Cafe, fast forward, she's now in third grade. This is last year before COVID. And she starting to have a lot of anxiety about school. Luckily, she was able to express what it was. She was worried because the bus kept becoming late to school that she was missing her morning job, right? So she gets to school and she's supposed to have a morning job, whatever that is, taking the computers to the media center, and she's doing it with a friend, and she wants to do this. She doesn't want to miss it. But the bus is continuously late. So we have two choices. One, we drive her to school, problem solved, right? She gets to go to her job and the anxiety goes away and we're fine. Or two, make a plan to have her cope with it, because I guarantee in her life, she will be late for something, right? So what we did is we said, we're not going to drive you to school. We're going to cope with the fact that the bus might be late, right? So what's your plan to cope with this when you get to school? What are you going to do? And so we brainstormed. All right, I'm going to talk to my friend and see if they'll do the job. I'll talk to my teacher, see if I can switch jobs, right? Like, we problem solved about 5 different solutions together, and she was able to come up with one that she agreed on. And that worked, right? Was she late for school? Yes, sometimes she was. Did she miss that job sometimes? Yeah, but she had that plan. She was able to kind of figure out a way to cope with that anxiety, as opposed to mom and dad fixing it, because that would have been way easier. Okay, we'll just drive you to school. It's a mile down the road, right? No, let's figure out a plan to cope with this. So, again, I hope you guys leave here with knowing that you guys can help your kids formulate plans and cope through the anxiety. They can do hard things, and you can support them in those hard things by staying calm, by being brave, and by using some of these strategies and scripts. I don't know, Caroline or Dan, if you want to say anything else. I don't know if there's any more questions. I didn't see any more.
Well, we're right up at the end of the hour. Michelle, how are we doing? I don't want to leave you without time to have any parting comments or remarks.
Well, I did see there was one additional question that was in there. If you want to go ahead and answer that, it was asking if there's any voice tone or music that can be helpful to calm the moment of anxiety.
Great question. My first thought was, if you know your kid and there is calming music that they like, great. Sometimes I know kids who are anxious or upset or angry, sometimes not even talking or just kind of writing together. Sometimes helps, kind of write some things down. What do you need? But yeah, tone of voice obviously is going to stay. We need it to stay calm and neutral. The example we always give is, again, if you call 911, the operator is always really calm for a reason, right? To keep us calm too. So the calmer you can stay, the more, scripts you can give. If this doesn't feel right now, I get it. I believe you. Let's do this, right? Real calm, real quiet. It's going to be important.
Thank you so much for this evening. Hopefully our parents who have been joining us have been able to get some hands-on ways to approach and help their kids when they're facing anxiety, and maybe even as adults ourselves when we're facing some of that, to be able to calm ourselves and think about what's going on around us. I don't even know what to say, because I'm so thrilled with the information that you shared, and just appreciate you giving of your time to help everyone here. And we have recorded it, so hopefully we'll be able to put that on the RIA website as well, so that anyone who was not able to attend and maybe was out enjoying this beautiful weather will have an opportunity to check out all the information you did as well. So again, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks guys for coming.
Have a great night, everyone. Thank you for joining us.